It was a cold, foggy evening when I first heard about the infamous Michigan's haunted highway. The kind of night where you can barely see the road in front of you, and everything seems a little off. A friend of mine, Jake, was the one who told me the story. He was the type to always joke around, making everything sound exaggerated and dramatic. But the look on his face that night made it clear he wasn't joking. If you ever find yourself driving down that road at night, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper, don't stop. Don't look out your window. And whatever you do, don't turn around. He paused for a moment, making sure I was looking him in the eyes. If you do, you might not make it back. I laughed it off, of course. Come on, Jake. It's just one of those spooky campfire stories, right? I said, trying to brush it off. I'm sure it's just some old myth. But Jake didn't laugh with me. Instead, his expression became more serious. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice even more. No, he said, his eyes narrowing. This isn't some story. People have gone missing on that highway for years. No one knows why. And no one who's driven down there at night has ever been the same after they came back. He let out a breath, the kind that sounded like he was trying to shake off some haunting memory. Something's not right about that place. Something unnatural. I felt a chill creep up my spine, but I didn't show it. I had heard stories like this before. Stories about cursed roads, haunted forests, and abandoned towns. But I had never paid much attention to them. They were just stories. Spooky tales people told to get a reaction, nothing more. Still, Jake's warning lingered in my mind long after we finished our conversation, and I couldn't shake the unease that settled deep in my gut. Jake had been acting strangely lately, and he wasn't one to make things up. He was the kind of guy who hated when anyone made fun of serious topics. So hearing him talk like this felt different. It was like the warning was coming from a place of real concern, not from someone trying to scare me. He even mentioned the chilling disappearances that had been happening over the years, some of them dating back to the 1980s. There were no answers. No explanations. Just people who drove down Michigan's haunted highway and never came back. Or worse, came back, but were never quite the same. Jake spoke about one case in particular that stood out to him. It was about a couple who decided to take a late-night drive on the highway. They were young, in their 20s, and just looking for a little thrill. The couple didn't believe in ghosts or curses. They thought it was just a road, a long, winding stretch through the woods. But that night, something changed. They had been driving for what felt like hours when they started hearing strange noises coming from the trees. At first, it was just the wind, or so they thought. But then it became more distinct. Whispers, soft and faint, like voices calling out to them. The couple thought they were just hearing things, so they kept going. But the whispers grew louder. And the closer they got to the middle of the highway, the more intense the feeling became. It was like something was following them, something that had been waiting for them. They described it as a suffocating presence, one that made the air around them feel thick, heavy, almost impossible to breathe in. The couple, reached a point where they could no longer ignore it. They started seeing shadows darting between the trees, moving faster than any living thing should. In a panic, they tried to speed up, but the car began to sputter. The headlights flickered, and the engine died. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, they had no choice but to get out and check the car. That's when it happened. A shadowy figure appeared on the side of the road, standing motionless in the darkness. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just watched them, its hollow eyes reflecting nothing but emptiness. The couple ran back to the car, but the figure wasn't alone anymore. More shadows began to emerge from the trees, surrounding them. They were outnumbered, trapped in the cold, suffocating night. Then, as quickly as they appeared, the shadows vanished, and the car started up again, like nothing had ever happened. Terrified, they drove back to town. But neither of them ever spoke of what happened that night. Something about it had changed them. They weren't the same. The couple, once full of life and joy, became withdrawn, paranoid, and distant. They started seeing things, figures in the corner of their eyes, strange noises in the night. The once vibrant couple had become shadows of their former selves. Jake said that the couple's disappearance wasn't even the scariest part. No, it was what happened to them when they returned. The way they acted, the vacant looks in their eyes. As if they had seen something that broke them. And that was the curse of the haunted highway. It wasn't just the people who disappeared. It was what happened to them when they came back. I remember listening to Jake's story, my mind racing with thoughts and questions. Could this be real? Could there really be a place like that? A place where the boundaries between the living and the dead were thin, where something sinister lingered just out of sight. And if it was real, why hadn't anyone done something about it? Why had no one figured out the truth behind all the disappearances? I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I tried to push the thoughts out of my head, the more they clung to me. The haunted highway wasn't just a legend. It was a real place. A road that had claimed people and twisted their minds. It was almost as if the road had a life of its own, feeding off the fear and curiosity of those who dared to enter. As I lay in bed that night, trying to forget what Jake had said, I heard something outside my window. A soft, rustling sound. I stood up, looking out into the night. All I could see was the thick fog that had rolled in, swallowing everything around me. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the yard. For a moment, I thought I saw something move. But when I looked closer, there was nothing there. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the fear creeping in again. The same fear that had begun to take root when Jake first told me about the highway. That night, I tried to sleep, but it was impossible. The stories kept replaying in my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more real it felt. Was it just a story? Or was there something out there, something that shouldn't be? The next morning, I woke up with the same unease. I knew I had to go to Michigan's haunted highway. I had to see for myself. The curiosity was too strong to ignore. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, Jake was right. Maybe this wasn't a road anyone should drive down. But there was only one way to find out, and now I couldn't stop thinking about it. The road was calling, and no matter how much I wanted to resist, I knew that soon enough I'd be on that highway, staring into the unknown. One weekend, the decision was made. I couldn't let Jake's warning linger in my mind without testing it out for myself. I convinced my cousin, Sarah, to join me for a late-night drive. At first, she wasn't too keen on the idea, but I told her it was just a drive down some random highway. Nothing special. The kind of night adventure that only seems fun when you're wrapped in the comfort of daylight, but somehow seems ridiculous in the silence of night. Despite her hesitation, Sarah agreed. We were always up for an adventure, though neither of us knew what was waiting for us down that road. We set out around midnight, the air thick with the kind of cool that only Michigan can offer in the fall. It wasn't unusual for us to drive at night, especially with no particular destination in mind. But tonight felt different. As we pulled out of the city and started to head into the woods, I couldn't shake the sense of unease creeping in. I glanced over at Sarah, who seemed unusually quiet, her eyes darting nervously between the road ahead and the darkness surrounding us. The headlights from my old car sliced through the night, casting long shadows against the trees. Everything seemed too still. The further we ventured, the taller and darker the trees grew, slowly blocking out the moonlight. It was as though the woods were closing in on us, making the road feel narrower with every mile. The air felt heavier too, like something in the atmosphere was off. It wasn't like the regular road trips we used to take, where the trees would thin out and the air would feel fresh and open. No, this felt like something was lurking just beyond the edges of the light, watching us, waiting. And with each passing minute, the atmosphere seemed to get thicker, heavier, like the road was pulling us deeper into something we couldn't yet see. Sarah, who had been staring out the window, finally broke the silence. "This doesn't feel right," she said softly, almost to herself, her voice tense. "Are you sure this is the right road?" I didn't answer immediately. I had no real reason to doubt Jake's story yet, but something inside me told me that once we crossed into this stretch of road, there would be no going back. "We're fine," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "It's just a highway, nothing to be afraid of." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew that wasn't true. It wasn't just any highway. It was the highway, the one Jake had warned me about. As we continued to drive, the world around us grew unnervingly quiet. There were no other cars, no sounds of animals in the distance, nothing. Just the low hum of my car's engine and the faint buzz of the headlights cutting through the thickening fog. It was as if the world outside was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I felt like we were the only two people left on Earth, driving through a space where time had stopped and nothing existed except for the road. The highway twisted and turned, the curve of the road unpredictable and sharp. The headlights barely cut through the fog now, and I had to squint to make out the road in front of me. The fog clung to the windshield, a dense, almost suffocating mass, and I had to slow down. Every now and then, my tires would hit a patch of gravel, making a low, screeching sound that echoed through the empty air. The road, as Jake had warned, didn't make sense. It didn't follow the pattern of regular roads. It felt like we were traveling through a loop, and the road itself was shifting, turning in ways that didn't seem natural. Then, just as we came around a bend, I saw something ahead. A sign. It was old, crooked, and barely hanging on, as though time had slowly eroded it. But it was there. The fog made it hard to read at first, but as we got closer, the letters became clear. The road of no return, it read in faded, chipped paint. My heart dropped. It was the same name Jake had mentioned, the same warning he had given me. I slowed the car, my foot hovering over the brake pedal. We both stared at the sign in silence, the words hanging in the air, heavy and ominous. I glanced over at Sarah, who was staring at the sign with wide eyes. "Should we turn back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to turn around, to forget about this entire trip, to pretend I never heard Jake's story, never saw the sign. But another part of me, the curious part, the one that wanted to know what was really out there, wanted to keep going. I was already this far. It felt like a challenge now. Like we couldn't just stop. The road had a strange pull to it, an almost magnetic force that kept us from turning back. "No," I said finally, my voice more uncertain than I intended. "Let's just see what's further down the road. We're almost there, right?" Sarah didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. She was just as unsure as I was, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes too. She wasn't going to turn back either. I pressed the gas pedal down slightly, and the car lurched forward. The sign slowly faded into the distance behind us, but the sense of unease lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting for us to make a wrong move. The air felt colder now, and the fog seemed to roll in thicker, wrapping around the car like an endless blanket. It wasn't long before we could barely see the road ahead. The trees were now so close, the fog so thick, that we were driving almost blind. We kept going, the headlights barely illuminating the next few feet of road. The silence was deafening now, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. This wasn't just any stretch of road. It felt different, as if the very earth beneath us was alive, and it didn't want us there. The trees loomed on either side like silent sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out toward us, stretching further into the night. The only sound now was the soft hum of the engine and the occasional click of the turn signal as I tried to stay on the narrow path. I glanced over at Sarah again, and she was gripping the armrest tightly, her knuckles white. I knew she was scared, but she was trying to hide it. I couldn't blame her. I was scared too. The road felt endless now. The more we drove, the more it seemed like we were getting nowhere, just lost in this maze of fog and trees. I wanted to stop, to turn back, but I didn't know if we could even find the way out now. And that's when it hit me. There was no turning back. The road, the highway, had already claimed us. It wasn't just a road anymore. It was something else. Something that had no intention of letting us go. The further we drove, the more oppressive the atmosphere seemed to become. The fog that had been lingering in the distance started rolling in more thickly, swallowing the road in its cold embrace. The temperature dropped drastically, and a strange, almost unnatural chill crept through the car, seeping into our bones. The world outside seemed to disappear into the thickening mist, and the faint outline of the trees became twisted shapes, barely visible in the fog. The headlights barely cut through the fog, offering us little more than a few feet of visibility ahead. I looked over at Sarah, her face pale as she stared out the window. She didn't say anything at first, but I could see the unease in her eyes. We'd been driving for what felt like hours, but we hadn't passed a single other car. No sign of life. It was as if the world around us had fallen silent, leaving us alone in this strange, foggy stretch of highway. Then, without warning, the car's engine sputtered. The headlights flickered, dimming and brightening as if struggling to stay on. The radio, which had been playing softly in the background, went silent. I reached over to adjust the dials, thinking it was just a technical glitch. But the radio didn't respond. My heart skipped a beat, and I glanced at the dashboard. The lights were flickering again, and the car seemed to stutter, as if it were gasping for breath. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. She gripped the edge of the seat, her fingers trembling. "I don't know," I said, my voice tight with anxiety. I pressed the gas pedal harder, but the car seemed to lose power. The engine sputtered again, and the car jerked slightly, as if it was struggling to stay alive. I tried to restart it, turning the key in the ignition, but it wouldn't budge. The engine made a strange clicking sound, refusing to cooperate. Panic started to rise in my chest. The car wasn't going anywhere, and we were stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by this oppressive fog. My hands began to sweat as I continued to turn the key, but nothing happened. The car remained dead. "Is it broken?" Sarah asked, her voice quieter now, almost too afraid to speak. "Maybe," I replied, my voice tight. "But there's something weird about this. It's like the car just shut off on its own." My words hung in the air like a bad omen, and Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she stared out the window, her eyes wide with fear. I could see her breath fogging up the window, and I knew she was just as scared as I was. I looked around the car, as if expecting something to jump out at me. The fog had grown so thick that I could barely see past the windshield. The trees seemed to loom even closer, casting twisted, distorted shadows on the road. It was eerily silent, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. I reached for my phone, hoping to get a signal, but it was completely dead. No bars, no connection. Suddenly, we heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible over the silence of the car. It came from behind us, like someone was speaking just behind my ear. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it sounded close, too close. My heart slammed against my chest as I froze, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Sarah's face went pale as she turned to look at me. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, my throat dry. "Yeah, I heard it." We both turned slowly, our eyes searching the back of the car. But there was nothing there. No one. Just the empty road stretching behind us, swallowed by the thick fog. The whisper had come from somewhere, but there was no one there to claim it. My heart raced, my mind spinning. "It's nothing," I said, my voice unconvincing, even to my own ears. "Probably just the wind or something." But as soon as I said it, I knew it wasn't the wind. It wasn't a natural sound. It was something else. Something unnatural. The fear that had been building in my chest suddenly gripped me, tightening around my ribs. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was all in my head, but the chill in the air and the unsettling feeling in my gut told me otherwise. Sarah wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring out the side window, her face frozen in fear. I followed her gaze, my breath catching in my throat. In the distance, barely visible through the dense fog, I saw it. A shadowy figure standing by the side of the road. It was tall, too tall, and its outline was distorted by the fog. It was impossible to make out any features, but there was no mistaking the presence of a figure standing motionless, as if waiting for us to notice. My blood ran cold. I slammed my foot on the brake, bringing the car to a screeching halt. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, staring at us. Or maybe staring through us. I couldn't tell. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, and for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The fog seemed to close in tighter, the darkness around the figure swallowing it whole. "What is that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't have an answer. I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed by fear, my eyes fixed on the figure standing by the side of the road. It didn't blink, didn't make a sound. It was as if it was waiting for us to make the next move. We stayed there, frozen in place, too scared to look away. I don't know how long we sat like that. Minutes? Hours? Time seemed to slow down, stretching out in the thick, suffocating fog. The only sound was the pounding of my heart in my ears. I wanted to scream, to turn the car around and drive away, but I couldn't. Something held me there, like a spell, keeping me from moving. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the figure began to fade. It didn't move, didn't walk away. It just melted into the fog, disappearing as if it had never been there at all. I blinked in disbelief, staring at the spot where the figure had stood. But it was gone. The road was empty again, and the fog had begun to thin out, though not by much. I let out a shaky breath, my hands still trembling on the steering wheel. Did you see that? I whispered, my voice hoarse. Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes wide with fear. I saw it. I saw it too. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, staring into the fog, trying to process what had just happened. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just the figure that scared me. It was the feeling of being watched. The feeling that something had been waiting for us to reach this point, this place. I finally managed to speak. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice shaking, now. But before I could start the car, something else happened. The fog grew thicker again, more oppressive, and in the distance, I thought I saw another shadow. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were more of them, scattered along the road, each one standing motionless, watching us. I didn't wait to see any more. Without saying another word, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, and the car lurched forward, racing down the road as fast as I could. The figure, the whispers, the shadows, they all seemed to follow us, lurking just out of sight in the fog, as if the road itself had become alive, and we were just another part of its twisted story. After what felt like an eternity, I finally managed to restart the car. The engine sputtered to life, and I let out a sigh of relief, my fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter as I accelerated down the road. The sound of the engine humming in my ears was a small comfort in the midst of everything that had happened so far. But as we passed the spot where the figure had been standing, something strange happened. The figure, which had been so clearly visible just moments before, was gone. Just like that, it had vanished. I slammed my foot on the brake, coming to a sudden stop. Sarah's wide eyes met mine in confusion. "What the hell?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Where did it go?" I couldn't answer her. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my thoughts were scattered. There was no way someone could have disappeared that quickly. I had seen the figure standing there just seconds ago, frozen, motionless, watching us. But now, nothing. Just the empty road and the thick fog that was creeping in again. We both scanned the area around us, hoping for some explanation, some sign that we had just imagined it. But there was nothing. No sign of a person, no movement in the trees. Just the same eerie silence that had haunted us since we first turned onto the highway. I hesitated for a moment, then started driving again. "I don't know," I said, trying to sound calm, even though I felt anything but. Maybe we just saw something weird. Maybe it was just the fog playing tricks on us. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. It wasn't fog, and it wasn't a trick. Something had been there. Something had been waiting for us. The road ahead seemed to stretch on endlessly, the fog swirling around us, thickening as we drove deeper into the woods. The trees, once sparse and normal, now seemed twisted, their branches reaching out at odd angles, contorting in unnatural shapes. The moon, which had been high in the sky just moments before, was now hidden behind thick, ominous clouds. The sky itself had turned an unsettling shade of red, casting a dull, sickly glow over everything. I glanced over at Sarah, and she was staring out the window, her face pale and tense, as if she were seeing something I couldn't. "Are you seeing this?" she asked quietly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the fear in it was unmistakable. I followed her gaze, my heart dropping into my stomach. The trees around us were no longer just trees. They were twisted, their trunks bent at sharp angles, as if they had been torn from the earth and shoved back into place at random. The landscape didn't look like anything I recognized. It was as though we had crossed into a different world entirely, one that wasn't bound by the rules of reality. The road seemed to stretch on forever, curving in ways that didn't make sense, as though we were driving in circles, and the more I tried to focus, the more my vision seemed to blur. I reached for the steering wheel, my hands suddenly slick with sweat. "This isn't right," I said, my voice low and shaky. I was trying to keep it together, but the sense of dread that had been gnawing at me ever since we first turned onto this road was now threatening to overwhelm me. This is not the same road. We're not going anywhere." Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean? What's happening?" "I don't know," I muttered, my eyes darting around, desperate for something familiar. "The road. It's not right. It's like we're stuck, but we're moving forward." I hit the gas again, pushing the car faster, but the landscape only seemed to become more and more bizarre. The trees were growing in impossible shapes, some of them twisting into spirals, while others looked as though they were leaning in toward the road, their branches scraping the sides of the car as we passed. The shadows between the trees flickered and shifted, making it impossible to tell what was real and what was an illusion. The further we went, the more it felt like the road itself was changing, like it was alive and pulling us deeper into its dark, twisted grip. My stomach churned as the fog thickened again, so dense that I could barely see the end of the hood of the car. The sense of isolation was overwhelming, the feeling that we were alone in this place, trapped in some kind of nightmare with no way out. Then, out of nowhere, something appeared in the fog ahead. It was a house, or at least it looked like one, but it was unlike anything I had ever seen. The house was half buried under overgrown vines, the windows dark and lifeless, and the door hanging ajar, as if it hadn't been touched in years. It was a house that shouldn't have been there. There was no road leading to it, no driveway, no sign of civilization. It looked as though it had been abandoned long ago, left to rot and decay in the middle of nowhere. I slammed on the brakes again, my heart skipping a beat as I stared at the house. "That's not on the map," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's no house here. There shouldn't be a house here." Sarah looked out the window, her face drawn and pale, her eyes wide with fear. "What is that place?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "But I don't think we should stop." Despite my words, something inside me told me that we had no choice. We had already crossed some invisible line, and whatever was happening to us, Whatever had happened on this road, it wasn't over. The house called to us, like it was drawing us in, and part of me felt like we had to stop, like the road wouldn't let us leave until we did. "Let's get out of here," Sarah pleaded, her voice urgent. "Please, let's just turn around. We're not supposed to be here." But before I could respond, the car suddenly came to a stop. It wasn't me. There was no reason for it. The car had been moving fine just seconds ago, but now it was dead. The engine sputtered and then fell completely silent. I tried to restart the car, my hands shaking as I turned the key, but it wouldn't budge. The car was stuck. I sat there, staring at the dashboard, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The fog was closing in again, and I could feel the pressure mounting around us. The house, now only a few feet away, loomed over us like some kind of twisted monument to the unknown. Sarah looked out the window, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "We need to go. We need to leave, now." But the car wouldn't start. We were stuck. I turned to look at her, my mind racing. We couldn't stay here. We couldn't stay on this road. But no matter how hard I tried, no matter how hard I pressed the gas or turned the key, the car didn't respond. It was like the road had us in its grip, refusing to let go. The house, silent and watchful, seemed to wait for us, its dark windows staring at us like eyes. Something inside me knew, deep down, that we had just crossed a line. We weren't supposed to be here. And now, there was no turning back. The road had taken us, and it wasn't about to let us go. I stepped out of the car, the cold air immediately biting at my skin. The fog had thickened even further, swallowing the surroundings in an eerie silence. My hands were trembling as I shut the door behind me, and I could barely see more than a few feet in front of me. The house loomed ominously in the distance, half hidden by the creeping fog. It was like something out of a nightmare, something that shouldn't exist. My heart was still racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The car had stopped for no reason, and we were stuck, stranded in the middle of nowhere, in this place that felt like it was suspended in time. I squatted down next to the car's hood, inspecting the engine, but it was no use. Everything seemed to be in place. The car shouldn't have stopped. It wasn't like it had overheated or there was a flat tire. There was no logical explanation. And as I stood there, in the thick silence, it felt like the fog itself was closing in on me, thickening around my legs, as if trying to pull me into the ground. That's when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible voice calling my name, Makeo. The sound was faint, barely audible over the noise of my own breathing. I froze. For a second, I thought I was imagining things, but it was too real to ignore. My name, whispered through the fog from somewhere close by. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned quickly, expecting to see Sarah standing behind me. But when I looked around, there was no one there. Just the oppressive fog and the sound of my own panicked breath. I glanced over at the car, expecting Sarah to be sitting in the passenger seat, waiting. But she wasn't there either. Panic set in, my mind racing. Where was she? I turned toward the road, and through the fog, I saw her. She was standing in front of the house, walking toward it, her figure barely visible in the mist. Her steps were slow, deliberate, as if she was drawn to it, like the house was calling her. I shouted her name, my voice raw with fear. Sarah, what are you doing? Get back here. But she didn't stop. She didn't even look back. She just kept walking, her figure fading into the fog, moving closer to the house. My heart stopped in my chest, and a cold sweat broke out across my skin. Something was horribly wrong. This wasn't Sarah. Not the way she was moving. Not the way she seemed so entranced. It was like she didn't hear me at all. I ran toward her, my legs feeling like they were wading through the thickening fog. Sarah! I screamed, but my voice barely carried. My steps grew frantic, my breathing coming in short, uneven bursts. I had to catch up. I had to stop her before she reached that house. But no matter how fast I ran, no matter how much I pushed myself, she seemed to be getting further and further away. The fog around me grew denser, and I couldn't make out anything but the outline of her figure, growing smaller with each step I took. Sarah, I yelled again, my voice cracking. Still, there was no response. She didn't even seem to hear me. She just kept walking, her face expressionless, her body stiff and unnaturally still, like she was being controlled by something other than herself. The house, once distant, was now looming closer, and with each step she took, I could feel the fear clawing at me, threatening to overwhelm me. I ran harder, pushing through the fog, desperately, trying to reach her, but it was useless. The house was no longer just a structure in the distance. It was now right in front of me, towering above me, as if it had pulled itself out of the ground, as if it had always been here, waiting for us to arrive. And that's when I saw it. A figure, standing next to Sarah. A shadow, pale and indistinct, almost transparent. It was a person, but it wasn't. It looked like a human shape, but the details were all wrong. Its form was like a blurry outline, indistinct and shifting, as if it didn't quite belong in this world. The figure stood beside Sarah, moving in sync with her. But unlike Sarah, it was not walking. It was hovering, its feet barely touching the ground. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure's head was tilted slightly, as if it were whispering something to Sarah. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the way it moved, slow and deliberate, like it was trying to tell her something, like it was trying to pull her deeper into the house. Sarah, I shouted again, my voice now a raw scream. Don't go near it. Get away from it. But Sarah didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, completely still, like she was in a trance. The figure, still by her side, moved slightly closer, its head still bent, whispering in her ear. I tried to move faster, tried to run to her, but my legs felt like lead, and the fog was thickening again, choking me, pulling me back. I could barely breathe, and the world around me seemed to be closing in. I called out to her once more, but this time my voice was barely audible. I was too far away. And then, as if in slow motion, Sarah turned around. Her eyes met mine, but they were empty, hollow. There was nothing in them. No recognition, no fear, no warmth. Just empty, vacant stares. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I felt a chill run through me. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "Please, come back." But she didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on me for a long moment. And then, without a word, she turned back to face the figure beside her. It was as if she had already forgotten me, forgotten everything, forgotten who she was. And then, in an instant, both of them, the figure and Sarah, vanished. Just like that. Gone. Disappeared into the fog, as though they had never been there at all. The house, too, seemed to fade with them, retreating into the darkness, as if it had never existed. One moment, they were there, and the next, nothing. Just the empty road, the fog, and me, alone. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, my mind struggling to grasp what had just happened. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Everything felt like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I glanced around, but there was no sign of Sarah, no sign of the figure. There was only the dense fog, rolling in waves across the road, consuming everything in its path. I called her name again, my voice cracking, but the only sound that answered me was the howling wind. The fog, thick and suffocating, wrapped around me like a vice. There was no trace of her, no trace of the figure, and for a moment, I thought I was losing my mind. But the truth was much worse. The road had taken her. The road had taken us both, and now I was alone. Alone in the thick fog, with no way out. The silence stretched on, unbearable, as I stood there, helpless. What had happened to Sarah? Where had she gone? I didn't know, but I had a sinking feeling deep in my gut that I wasn't going to like the answer. The road had changed us. It had changed everything. And now, there was no going back. I sprinted back to the car, my feet stumbling over the rough ground, panic making my every step feel like a desperate, wild escape. I needed to get in. I needed to leave. But as I reached the door and threw it open, something caught my eye. The dashboard, frozen. The clock read 12 a.m. It shouldn't have been possible. It had been hours since we first entered this cursed stretch of road. Yet the time had stopped. The engine was cold to the touch, as if it had never been running in the first place. The car, like the world around me, was stuck, imprisoned in some unnatural void. I pulled the door shut with a slam, as if the noise would somehow break the tension that had taken over everything. I checked the gear shift, pushed the key again, but the car didn't respond. The engine was dead, completely dead. the entire world seemed to freeze in place, like a snapshot of a nightmare that was never meant to end. The fog had thickened to the point where I couldn't see a foot in front of me. The air felt heavier now, as if it was pushing me down, suffocating me. The trees that had been distant shadows were now looming close, pressing in on all sides, their twisted limbs reaching toward me like skeletal fingers, trying to pull me into the depths of the night. I felt the pressure in my chest tighten, and I knew this wasn't just bad luck. This was something else. The road had done this. The trees, the fog, the time on the dashboard, all of it. It wasn't real anymore. It wasn't just a highway. It was something far worse. Something that had claimed both Sarah and me, trapping us here in a nightmare that had no end, no exit. It was a road that led nowhere, a road that you could never leave once you were on it. I couldn't stay here, though. I couldn't just stand around, waiting for whatever had happened to Sarah to happen to me too. I turned away from the car, determined to walk. It didn't matter where, I just needed to get away from this place. I started walking, my legs unsteady beneath me, unsure whether they were moving from fear or from some instinctive desire to survive. Every step I took seemed to be a struggle against an invisible force trying to pull me back into the fog, into the shadows that clung to the road like a heavy shroud. The fog was no longer just an obstruction of sight. It was a presence, a thick, oppressive weight that hung in the air, making it harder to breathe. It seemed to swirl around me, thickening as I moved forward. The trees, now even closer, cast long, twisted shadows that stretched across the ground, their outlines distorting into grotesque shapes as if they were alive and watching me, waiting for me to falter. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was behind me, following me. Something I couldn't see, but could feel, like a cold breath on the back of my neck, brushing against my skin. I kept walking, not daring to turn around. The road itself began to play tricks on my mind. At first, it seemed to be straight, but then it twisted, the path bending in unnatural angles. Every time I tried to find the end, I ended up in the same place, as if the road itself had shifted, pulling me deeper into its trap. I couldn't see the end of the fog, and I couldn't see anything familiar. The road was endless, the same stretch of cracked asphalt repeating itself over and over. The world around me felt like it was on a loop, repeating endlessly, as if time had stopped, just like the clock in the car. I stopped for a moment, my breath ragged, trying to steady myself. It was no use. The shadows were closing in, and they were whispering to me, their voices soft and seductive in the wind. The words were indistinct, but I could feel them. They were urging me to turn around, to give up, to go back to the car and stop fighting the inevitable. But I couldn't, not anymore. There was nothing to go back to. The car was dead, Sarah was gone, and I had no idea how I had gotten here or how to escape. I pressed on, my feet dragging, each step heavier than the last. The whispers continued, growing louder, more urgent. The fog seemed to thicken even more, swirling around my feet, making it feel as though the ground itself was trying to pull me under. My heart pounded in my chest, the fear building with every passing second. I knew this wasn't just some bad dream. This was real. This place was real, and it was not going to let me go. The further I walked, the more I felt like I was being swallowed by the road, like the world around me was folding in on itself. The road twisted again, and when I glanced up, I saw that the trees had become more distorted, more twisted than before, their branches now reaching toward me like claws. The sky above had darkened to a deep, blood-red hue, and the air had become suffocating. I felt dizzy, nauseous, and my legs were giving out beneath me, but I couldn't stop walking. I looked down at the ground, my eyes searching for something familiar, something that could tell me where I was. But all I saw were the cracks in the road, the same cracks that had been there when I first stepped onto it. The road hadn't changed. It was still the same road, and I realized then that it wasn't a road at all. It was a trap. It was never meant to be traveled. It wasn't a path that led anywhere. It was a place that kept you stuck forever. The road had no end, no exit, no return. It wasn't a road that led to freedom. It led to the abyss. I stopped for a moment, my body shaking from exhaustion, my mind a whirl of confusion and terror. I didn't know how long I had been walking, but it didn't matter. The road had claimed me, just like it had claimed Sarah. We were both trapped here, lost in this endless nightmare. There was no escape. The road had no return. It didn't matter how far I walked, how hard I tried to find my way out. Every step I took, every turn I made, brought me deeper into its grip. The whispers from the shadows were louder now, and they were no longer just whispers. They were voices, calling my name, beckoning me to stop, to surrender to the darkness that surrounded me. I could hear Sarah's voice among them, calling to me, but it wasn't her voice anymore. It was hollow, empty, like something had taken her. Like something had taken both of us. The road had claimed me, and I realized in that moment of terrifying clarity that I would never leave. I had become part of it now, just as Sarah had. The road of no return had no end, no exit, no hope. And if you ever find yourself driving down this highway, don't stop. Because once you do, it will claim you too. You'll never make it out. You'll be lost, just like the others, caught forever in the fog, walking on the road that leads nowhere. The road of no return will take you, and you'll never come back.